thank you for tuning in to Marquette Moments for Monday, April 6th. I'm Kyle Whitney. I'm here with the Mayor of Marquette, Mike Coyne, and City Manager Bill Vajda. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Kyle.
And just to start out, it's been a couple of weeks since we've shot the show. We're here again in the manager's conference room in the city manager's office in City Hall in Marquette. And just to start out today, I think one of the topics that people are finding interesting, it seems like we say this every time we have one of these shows, Your Honor, is the new hospital project and what's going on with that, where that process is. At the last city commission meeting, there was some discussion about the city sending some representatives down to Tennessee, actually, to talk to the hospital team about that process. Can you kind of fill us in on where that stands?
Yes. 3 commissioners and the city manager are going to go next Tuesday to Brentwood, Tennessee for a day to visit with the team that is putting this project together on behalf of Duke LifePoint. And they also have a bunch of renderings that they have from several architectural firms as to what the building is going to look like, ranging from very modern to quite traditional, fitting in with the architecture of the city. And they would like some input regarding that. And mainly they invited us to come and meet the people that are putting this together, which was gracious of them. The issue was whether the city should pay for it or not. And frankly, appropriately, people voiced their opinion at the meeting, and I think the majority of the commission wished to go ahead and pursue that meeting. Frankly, I think it would, in thinking in retrospect, it would be almost inappropriate for Duke LifePoint, in my opinion, to pay because they have not signed the purchase agreement yet. And hopefully our visit might correspond with the 2 sets of lawyers getting together and having the purchase agreement there so we could possibly take some action on that. But I think it's almost inappropriate for them to pay for somebody to come that they're negotiating with. So that was not brought up. But I think it's just plain good common business sense for us to go visit them, see their headquarters, meet a whole bunch of people that we have no faces to, and vice versa. So we can, I think we're very close from what I hear from our attorney and city manager to having a purchase agreement and then having them get on with the project. The sooner the better.
And it seems like people are most interested in some of the public-facing aspects of this project, whether it's what the building's going to look like, when it's going to open, what the campus itself will look like, and how it ties into the community, or even what happens with the old hospital. And the answers to a lot of those questions are ultimately going to have to come from DLP. But is there any sense of how that process is going to roll out, or if and when they're going to engage in that public process?
Well, we made it very clear to them they need to have better public relations and public image. They've had some issues with that, and we are very much in support of their building this building or project. And we've told them that when they finally get their stuff together and when they know what they're going to build, they need to involve the public in that. And I'm right there with the public. I don't know any more than they do because Duke LifePoint hasn't really said specifically, this is what we're going to do, here's where it's going to be, and we need to have that and have that open. And so when we come back, we will tell the commission and the public what we did. I mean, it's not a secret. We're the citizens' representatives trying to establish a rapport with Duke LifePoint and seeing who they are, and then hopefully move them along in the process, and then have really made it clear to them that they need to be more open and involve the public in this wonderful project.
Okay. And this is kind of just a free-for-all, more or less. I mean, if you have anything to add to any of these topics, Bill.
I think the mayor's doing really fine job of explaining it. We have a potential business partner that's going to come in, buy a substantial amount of property, ask us to rearrange the city a little bit in support of that. And so far, a lot of those discussions have really been focused on kind of the administrative things that we deal with. Going through setting up memorandums of understanding and having discussions with the Economic Development Corporation here in Michigan and with Duke LifePoint, and ultimately trying to secure financing and trying to figure out a lot of the quantitative mathematical contract kind of things associated with the project. But ultimately the hospital part of the project is exclusively Duke LifePoints, and we get questions all the time about what's going on with the new hospital, what's it going to look like, what are they going to do with the old hospital, and that's private property. Back in the old days when the hospital was nonprofit and the city had a finance board behind it, we might have had better insight into what their plans are. But right now they're a public corporation for profit, trying to decide what they want to do with their facilities. And I agree, it's just common business sense that the elected leaders and whoever they choose to take along with them go and have a chat with Duke LifePoint about what their plans are. We'll certainly be able to come back and share all of our experiences. There's nothing secret, but ultimately this is on Duke LifePoint to give the community a better sense of what's going on. And we're hopeful while we're down there to get a chance to get to see some of the people behind the decision making. Of course, an awful lot of coordination goes on by telephone and video conference every week. It's been going on that way since last September, but that still doesn't replace kind of good old-fashioned hand-in-hand, face-to-face chats. We're hopeful to meet the people who are making the decisions and the rest of their team. We're hopeful to see some preliminary status updates on where they stand with some of the issues that are facing them with other certifications in the state. Take a look at maybe some of the early renderings of what they think that campus is going to look like. There are a number of different plans here in the city that focus on the aesthetics of our community, our skyline, how public art might be integrated into some of these areas. And it's an interesting location. We've got Duke LifePoint, we've got another development, brownfield project called Liberty Way right up the hill. They're split right down the middle by the Arnor Heritage Trail. And we want to preserve the character of all of these different amenities and even hopefully improve them through different kind of public-private partnerships those stakeholders might be interested in chatting about. But these are all things that are on the agenda. Tentatively, we'll get through them, and hopefully we'll have a lot to come back and report about that's positive and gives people a sense of what they can expect next. I know the mayor and I are personally very hopeful that as part of that chat, we'll be able to let DLP know the urgency that the community feels in trying to get some kind of local understanding of what their plans are for that future hospital and the old hospital. And hopefully then one of the things that we'll see as follow-up is more and more DLP engagement, maybe some town hall meetings, maybe some routine communications, just to let folks know what's going on and answer some of the questions that we struggle to. So wholly appropriate for DLP to come forward and do that, and we'll look forward to hearing more from them and sharing it with everybody.
I think an important thing also is our trip is a way of telling Duke LifePoint, we really want this to happen. It's not we don't care. By saying to them, you need to be more open, doesn't mean that we're being critical. It means you need to be more open in order to kind of circumvent all the negative people and the negative rumors. And frankly, I mean, there are just lots of rumors. And what prompted a phone call from the vice president to me last week was he had received several letters that were just profoundly negative, and I pretty much knew who wrote them because they're pretty negative, outspoken people. And I said, are they from these people? And they said, yes. And I said, well, that does not represent the whole community's thinking. And I told him that I canceled a vacation to come to Duke LifePoint in Nashville because I think it's important and I want this to happen. And I get feedback from lots of people in the community, and I think they're frustrated because they don't know. I don't know. I'm frustrated too, but that doesn't mean I'm not supportive of the program. And I said, the reason we're coming is we want this to happen, we want your development to work and to be very successful, and that's why we're coming. And to not do that, I think, is a real wrong message. And I think it's also would be wrong, as I mentioned, for them to pay for us to come, because that looks like they're trying to influence us. And that's not the case. If anything, we're trying to influence them to get going, get it done, share it, and then stop all the rumors and all the negative thinking and just get going with it. And this has been 2.5 years of hard work on their part and our part. And it's very complicated to get all this together. And hopefully we're close, and we're still very positive about this. I think that's important.
I guess moving on from that, we've been talking about this lengthy planning process and this large-scale planning process that's going to influence in a lot of ways the future of parts of the city. Transitioning to a planning process the city has a little more control over directly. The community master planning process, I know, has been drafting a new community master plan is a process that's been going on for years, I think, at this point, and that's starting to wrap up. I know the draft plan is now posted on the city website. They're accepting comments on that. Bill, from a staff perspective, how much work has gone into this to this point?
Yeah, well, it's one of those documents that is required by state law to be maintained once every 5 years. It serves as the broad basis for land use planning in the community. So in a very large sense, it's kind of that baseline document that drives a lot of other things. Because it's a comprehensive plan, it includes both the kind of the nuts and bolts mechanical issues of things like zoning and approved uses for different kind of property, along with the aspirational kind of interest that the community has for different kinds of development. And a lot of that serves as the baseline document for organizations like the Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Board of Appeals, and other documents. So from an administrative standpoint, from a community standpoint, it's critical that we have that, because it carries forward then through the years and keeps us focused on the outcomes folks are looking for. In terms of the challenges of getting it done, you can imagine it's a community document and a comprehensive community document, very time consuming. The Planning Commission's been working on an update for years. There's an 18-step process that we need to go through, and not just to kind of coordinate the release of that document within the city, but also with our regional neighbors, with the state of Michigan and other organizations, to allow them comment. So once we get to a draft, it can be a significantly time-consuming process to move it forward from there. But the good news is it reflects, hopefully, the views of the community and what they'd like Marquette to become and how they'd like us to get there. And when you take that document and you couple it with the strategic plan that the city charter requires, the economic development plan, each one of the functional plans like park and recreation, art and culture, waterfront, harbor advisory plans, and then you take a look at the strategic priorities of the commission on any individual session, it provides a considerable amount of specificity as to what exactly it is that we're going to hope to get done at any given time. And with the trickle-down impacts of constrained resources from the federal and state levels, and with a very clear understanding from the city commission and the residents that they don't want to solve all these problems by taxing themselves to death or seeing taxes and fees raised beyond the point where it makes Marquette an affordable place to live. Having that really clear sense of specificity, exactly what it is that the community wants to become and exactly how they want to lay out a path to get there, makes everybody's jobs a lot easier. So I'm very hopeful that the same kind of energy that we're seeing go into things that might not be fully and completely within our control is the same kind of energy and positive focus that people put into these kind of documents.
Well, I just echo some thoughts. Most people see the master plan as that's sleep-inducing. I mean, who cares? But without a master plan, this city wouldn't have direction. Okay, and why Marquette is so successful is because it's had a very excellent master plan and very talented people over the years setting where we're going and what we have to do in order to be what we want to be. And this planning commission over a couple year periods has just done a great job with this. I mean, it's just, and even though it's like over 200 pages, it's worth reading because there's stuff in there that they've just done so much factual findings of neighborhoods and age and occupations and they have a whole section of the history of Marquette, which is just outstanding, and lots of data. And I really think it's an excellent document, and it's not just a whole bunch of people in a room doing it. They've had tremendous community input. They've had meetings in the Commons with anybody welcome to come. This process, we had a meeting with the Planning Commission and the City Commission, a work session last week. They're going to present this document to us probably at the next City Commission meeting. And then there's a 42-day period where people can read it. And I've already had 2 people come and look at my document because they didn't want to read it 250 pages on a computer and have suggestions. And then there's like 13 more steps to have this done, all public input. So the common thing people always say, well, you need more public meetings. Well, this has been public meeting to death, and it's still going to be that. And it's great because it's a community master plan, well done by the members of the Planning Commission and the staff. So if you have an opportunity when we have it presented to us, it would be very excellent for people to look at it and say, well, I have this idea, and maybe you weren't at the planning sessions when they were developing this, and that's why this 42-day period is there. And even at the meeting, many of the commissioners had very good questions and ideas that we needed to re-look at, and some of them were very, I mean, it's such a big document, the planning commissioners were saying, well, this is uncovered under this and this. So it's a great process, and it's what keeps this city on track, and as opposed to just chaos. And this isn't chaos, this is well planned.
And I was going to add too, you mentioned it there, that document being online, that is hosted now, I believe, on the city website, that draft document. People can access it, and we'll make sure that we have a link available to it on the video. But if you do want to look through it, that's all available online. So we're sitting here on April 6th. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves or jinx anything. It looks like we're almost getting to a point where spring might actually happen. The winter might break a little bit. And just a couple of things I wanted to touch on real quickly related to that. One is the Lakeshore Boulevard process. I know that that road's been closed for some period of time. There were a lot of erosion issues along the shoreline there that were starting to impact the road surface. The city closed that portion of road. There was some funding being sought to maybe help mitigate some of those issues. And I believe the last thing that was said at the city commission meeting was that staff would come back to that as weather allowed in the spring. Are there any updates to that process, or are we still kind of in a holding pattern waiting for real spring to happen?
Well, a little bit of both. The way we're going to define spring for the engineering purposes for that road is it's not just what you see above the ground, but of course it's what's going on below the ground. With frost in particular, when you've got frozen ground, you've got a heave and thaw cycle, and we're still definitely below the ground frozen. There's still a very, very high frost line. So we need to let the ground thaw out a little bit to see what the full extent of the damage might be in the area. But in the meantime, we've been trying to line up resources that can help the city mitigate the emergency we have down there. We have reached out to multiple different federal and state organizations and authorities trying to line up that money. So since the last commission meeting, we've had discussions with the U.S. EPA, the U.S. HUD, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA. We've reached out to our elected federal leaders. We've reached out to multiple state departments, including the DNR, the DEQ, the Waterways Commission, the governor's office. We've reached out to Senator Casperson and Representative Kivala. So we've got a lot of different irons in the fire trying to find folks who might be willing to help us find the resources we need to fix all the damage that's gone on down there. I know to kind of the casual observer, it might look like it always did, just big piles of rocks and wet roads and things like that. But the challenge is with the flooding that we saw last winter, that water all seeped into the ground before it froze. It undermined the substrate on the road. It had an impact on a lot of the utilities and things that run in the area. Washed out a fair amount of the wells that are there, testing the groundwater interface between the Cliffsdale property and Lake Superior. It pulled out, both because of the storm impacts as well as the freeze impacts, considerable amount of the shore cladding, and pulled all those boulders out into lake along with throwing them up on the road. So it's going to be a fair amount of cleanup and a fair amount of assessment. So we're very hopeful that we can find some partner somewhere who's going to be able to bring some resources to bear to fix that. Folks might recall that July of 13, we had done an engineering study of that stretch of roadway, trying to prepare for what might be 1 in a 100-year storm event, as well as taking a look at how we could reuse the area. I think the quote was, could be 8 hours or 18 years on when something could happen. It turned out to be closer to 8 hours with the impacts that we suffered down there. The City Commission has approved a design for how they'd like to reconstruct that part of the city. It's going to mean reconstructing the shore cladding, moving the road, restoring some of the coastal ecosystem, maybe putting in some amenities to preserve public access down there, so maybe some small parking lots or something like that to replace things that might have been washed away as part of the storm damage. And so we have a comprehensive understanding and fortunately a very specific target for what kind of resources are going to be necessary to fix it. We just don't have a clear idea when the federal budget or the state budget processes might be able to help us get started. And it might not be something we can do all at once. It might take a while, different phased projects to start recreating everything based on whatever resources we might have available. And it might make us take a different look at how we control that area in the meantime, because we know it's something that's extremely popular and important with the residents of Marquette. And we don't want to leave it closed any longer than we have to, but we don't want to expose the community to an unsafe situation, and we don't want to jeopardize our opportunity to maybe leverage some of these other resources so that the taxpayers here in the city don't have to bear the full cost of reconstruction on their own.
I would just follow up from kind of a non-government mind myself. When we were talking about this a few months ago, the thought was, well, why don't you, when it thaws, why don't you just build a temporary road there? Well, I'm not a government thinker and I'm not an engineer, and that would cost a lot of money. And also, we need to try everything we can to get funding for this road. But if we put like a little gravel road there, the people who are the grantors of the monies are going to say, well, it's not an emergency. You don't need any money. You have, even though it's a inferior road with erosion and everything, then we're not going to give you any money. So the point is, we've got to get the money, whatever we can, and we're talking $8 to $10 million, and to make a temporary road is kind of counterproductive to get the $8 million or part thereof. And I think the reality is that we've got to, and we are doing everything we can to get grants to help this occur. And the storms aren't limited to November. There's some pretty strong spring storms, and there's no protection for that road. So if we did something, there's no guarantee that 8 hours later there wouldn't be any road there. And we have a good plan. It's shovel ready, basically, for if we can get the money. So I think that I'm surprised at this. I was with some folks, and they were complaining they couldn't get to Presque Isle. These were people who'd lived here maybe a year. I said, well, you can go down Hawley Street and go this way. Really? They did not know that you could actually get there despite the detour signs. So perhaps a little better signage would be helpful, but the reality is we've got to get something done with that road because it is a mess right now. And we're doing everything we can, and I think we have all our ducks in order for the funding. We'll see what happens. And I think people are just going to have to deal with the detour and maybe have better signage, because you can get to Prescott, it's just out of the way.
Right. And I mentioned, having a couple of things related to spring I wanted to talk about, Your Honor. I know it's typically, it's a rite of passage come spring for the city. I believe the mayor, city manager, to welcome the first ore boat of the season into the harbor in Marquette. I mentioned the date today, April 6th, because that first ore boat was scheduled to be here Friday, correct?
Yes.
And it's still not here?
Nope. First of all, I'd like to clarify, Johnny DePietro made the, when he was mayor, it's the mayor pro tem's responsibility for the weather, so I have nothing to do with that. It's Dave Campana's fault.
Okay.
But I've been waiting, and actually I asked Dave if he would, on Friday, he said, well, when is the boat coming? And I said, well, I don't really know, but the mayor pro tem's job is to go out on the end of the ore dock and stand and wait. Well, he's been there since Friday, okay? And he called and said, I quit. He's not doing that anymore. So it's supposed to be here tomorrow at about 8 in the morning. That's 5 days. And why? They're not just, lazy. They've been stuck in Whitefish Bay in the ice, and then the Coast Guard cutter came to the rescue, and it broke down. So then we have the ore boats. They were going to form a convoy. So we have all the ore boats stuck and the Coast Guard cutter stuck, and then they had to send a Coast Guard cutter from Superior, Wisconsin, and apparently it arrived, and they at least now say it'll be here tomorrow morning.
And this, mind you, is not as bad of a winter as we had last year.
No, but ice is ice, especially in Whitefish Bay. It's a little more than here, and it doesn't move around quite as much because it all gets jammed in there. So I'm sure they'll be glad to get here, and it's just been a tough 5 days for them. Look forward to seeing them. Yeah,
and hopefully next time we come back, we can, mention that experience as something that's happened in the past and not something we're still waiting for. I think that's pretty much all that I had topically. I don't know if there's anything that either of you wanted to touch on that we hadn't gotten around to this episode.
Well, congratulations on your new baby.
Well, thank you.
That's happened since we were last doing this, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm still upright, so that's a success, I think. But from what I hear. But anyway, thank you, everybody, for coming, and thanks for tuning in. We'll be back. I think the next one is scheduled for April 16th, something like that. The date doesn't really matter as we're taping, but we try to get it following every commission meeting so we can be topical in some way.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Well, here's a question.
Yeah.
We've been doing this. I have no idea how to find these. Would you tell us, the citizens and me? Of course, if they are listening to this, they obviously know how to find it. I don't know how to find this program.
Yeah, absolutely. The program is available. It airs on Channel 191, our local government access channel, Charter Cable Channel 191, on a rotating basis in between tapings, and then we turn it over. It's also available on our YouTube channel, which is City of MQT Gov, City of Marquette Gov, I believe. We'll make a link available on our website as well.
Thanks for looking confused.
Yeah, well, our IT wizard, Tori Dupra, created that YouTube handle. Yes. And then we also we make it available through social media. We share every episode on Facebook, on Twitter, things like that. I was also thinking we have a newsletter that we put out quarterly that I think we can use that venue to try to distribute some news from the city as well. This is basically a video newsletter.
Yeah. Let me also, and I'm speaking, I hope, directly to the public now. This has really started out as an experiment. We're looking for getting feedback from the community if this is something you're interested in seeing us to continue or to maybe evolve into something different. Our goal would be to continue the segments that are interesting to you, to expand them to include things that you might also like to see going on. So it's been pretty much the mayor and I for the inaugural ones. We'd be glad to add other city commissioners. We'd be glad to private citizens. So we, for example, in this show I know we spoke a lot about DLP. We'll hope to get DLP in and have discussions in future Marquette moments. So kind of from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Also, if this format works or not, we'd like to hear about it, because we can certainly go out, visit different parts of the city, tape things live, or even do man on the street kind of interviews to get a sense of those things that might be important to you. So we want to make this useful, we want to make it interesting, and we're counting on your help and your guidance to do so. So please feel free to get a hold of either Kyle or I, and we'll make sure that we update the program accordingly and make sure everybody's ready to support it and make it always better. So thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you.